Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to High on Rugs. I apologize for my absence, and if you're new here, welcome. We're going to be making a new rug today, which is going to be inspired by Legend of Zelda. But before we can get to making the rug, we have to get our prep work out of the way. The first step is to cut our cloth and hang it onto our tufting frame. And as you can see, I start from the top and start pulling around the edges, making it tighter and tighter, trying to keep those guidelines straight that you can see on the fabric. I just keep pulling it until it is tight, tight, tight.
Tight, 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 yeah!
And I decided to go around with the scissors and cut off any little loose ends, and the tufting cloth is ready to go. So now I've pulled up my image on the computer and hooked it up to the projector and get it right where I want, and we can start tracing out the design. Now I should probably preface by saying that this is not my design. I found this on Google Images. I honestly don't know who the original artist is. I don't know if it was done by an individual, or if it is official Nintendo artwork. But I love this image. I've had it saved on my phone for a while, with the intention of eventually making this rug. And as you can see by the image, it is quite an elaborate design. That's kind of what I wanted to go for. I wanted to do something that was overwhelmingly elaborate, had a lot of different colors, a lot of line work. I wanted to try to wow everybody. However, I also dug quite a hole for myself because there was so much to do in every single step. This tracing alone took, I think, 2.5 hours. And yeah, it took a while, just sitting there with Sharpies. I had a handful of them because they run out pretty quickly when you're drawing on cloth. But once I think I've finally got every single line drawn, I can go ahead and flip the light on and see what we've got. And hey, it looks pretty good. So now we can get started, and of course, like I always like to do, I start with the black outline first. It kind of gives me a skeleton, so to speak, to start to work off. It would be kind of counterintuitive to start with the colors instead of outlining everything first. But this is honestly one of my favorite parts of the whole process, is that I kind of get to just follow my own line work, but now I fill it in with yarn. It's kind of like I like to draw, and sometimes I'll do things with pencil, and when I'm happy with it, then I go over it with a pen or a Sharpie to really bolden up the lines and make it look darker and nice. So that's what this feels like, but with yarn, and more time consuming. But yeah, trying to make sure all my lines are nice and parallel so we get nice looking bricks or those white tiles that are around the perimeter. And I want my Triforces to look symmetrical. And of course, you want your circles to look pretty much perfectly circular, which can be quite difficult to do. Because when you're using the tufting gun on the cloth, it kind of tends to want to go horizontal or vertical, where curves are, you really got to kind of try to force it. You got to be assertive with your tufting gun. And one thing that was really important to get a nice curve on was this hat. We don't want a blocky looking hat when it's supposed to be this swoopy kind of wizard hat looking thing. And I think I did pretty well on that. There are a few things about how this all turned out in the end that I'm not super thrilled about. But I haven't made a rug in well over a year. So this was kind of coming back to it and trying to re-establish the skills that I have gained since I started this journey. All these ornate details were quite challenging. I tried to get them to mirror each other on each side of the rug as well as possible. There are some variations, but overall I think it came out pretty good. If I had to do it again, I think I would cut out a lot of those tiny little details in that tiny little shield. I probably should have modified the design to simplify it a little bit, which I actually do on Link's shield further down, and I think it actually made it look better. It's not as ornate, but you can't. It's really hard to get into those tiny, tiny details when you're using yarn. I mean, it's not impossible, but my god, is it time consuming. And again, more very ornate details down here towards the bottom with this cool little design. Just trying to make sure I get all my curves looking very nice and get everything to mirror. Symmetry is the name of the game. And making a tiny little Triforce on his shield. And I think this one came out real good. Which I was just saying, it's hard to get the tiny little details, but we're on to the red. I kind of just choose which color is going to be next by either what I feel like doing or what will be most abundant throughout the rug. And I think aside from black, red is definitely the most prominent color because we have it for the border that I'm working on now. And also quite a few of the stained glass panels, I guess you would call them, throughout the background behind Link. And also this took a while. But I think one thing I've really learned in the last year is to slow down and be more patient and just try not to rush things. I think that was my big problem in my previous videos, is that I wanted so badly to finish the rug, to finish the video, and post it on this channel to see how well it would do. And I don't think that was sustainable. I think I burnt myself out a little bit and needed to take a break for a while to kind of go back and reevaluate. I try to get into the mindset of this is going to take however long it takes to finish, and there's no point in rushing it because that is going to give you a subpar product in the end. It's like, well, we are on the topic of Nintendo with this being a Legend of Zelda rug. I think it was Shigeru Miyamoto, I'll have to fact check myself, said, a rushed game is forever bad, but a delayed game is eventually good. And, I apply that to the rugs. If I rush myself, it's going to be bad forever. And if I really take my time and I try my best, it will come out a lot better. They say the lazy man works twice as hard. So I found that by slowing down, not only am I in a better headspace while I'm doing all this, I think the product itself comes out better. So the red border's all done, and now it's time to work on some of the red tiles that are behind Link. And obviously there's a lot of tiles, and there's a lot to keep track of, so I decided to go with a new technique where I was looking at the image, and then I would take my marker and just draw a little X on each one of them that I had to do. So I know those are the ones that I need to fill in. And I just keep going until I see no more X's. And we're on to the blue. I got this nice, I want to say icy blue, but it's not really. It's like a glacier water blue. And again, we're just going through and doing all the background tiles. I believe that's all I needed the blue for, were just the background tiles. And much like the Foo Fighters, I have another confession to make. And this is a big one if you're a Zelda fan. So I know they use Toon Link in a lot of the games now, but I believe his first appearance as Toon Link was in Wind Waker. But honestly, it could be from a lot of the games where he has this design. But my confession is that I've never played Wind Waker.
That's disgusting!
I know, big time poser over here. I never really had a GameCube. I went from Super Nintendo to Nintendo 64, and then I got a PS2. So I kind of missed out on the GameCube era, and I never played Wind Waker. Majora's Mask is always my favorite one. I just missed out on Wind Waker. If they release it on the Switch, I'll definitely play it, but I missed out on that one. And now that all the blue tiles are gone, we're switching over to this pinkish purpley color, which is not exactly like the same color as the design, but that was like the closest I had, and well, the closest color that I liked that I had. And it's almost like a metallic-y kind of sheen to it if you look at it from the right angle. I really like this color, it's nice. And again, just Xing out all the spots that I need to apply this to and going at it. And I filmed absolutely every bit of my tufting process here, which when I got to my editing studio, it ended up being about 5.5 hours of footage, and I was like, oh god, where do I even begin? That being said, I'd also like to post those long-form rug tufting ASMR videos, which have been 1 hour to 3 hours. So if you're a fan of those, I've got a long video coming of me making this rug in the long-form ASMR style. But that's it, we're done with that pinkish purple, and it's time to move on to the white, which I would say is one of the more prominent colors, but I just held off on it because it looked a bit insurmountable at the time. I was like, oh man, I gotta do all the tiles on the outside, on the inside, the arches above his head, and a few of the tiles. It just seemed like a lot, so I was kind of holding off. And I definitely was a bit more meticulous. I had a system going with the white. So for the outside panels, I was doing 3 beads across, and then for the inside panels, I was doing 2. That way, hopefully in the end, they would all have a uniform thickness, depending on which part of the rug they're on. So the outside's a little thicker, the inside is a little thinner. You get it. It's also funny to see just how much my appearance changes throughout this video, because I was working on this for a good 6 weeks or so. And in that time, I shaved off my beard, then I got a haircut, and the beard started to grow back, and then I shaved it off again. Like, it just keeps changing. And of course, we got to do that white circle around the circular emblem towards the top, and the border around both shields. So there was a lot of white to apply. And also, more background tiles. There are a few, not as many as the other colors, but there are a few that are in white. And those were pretty quick and easy to knock out. And one more thing I needed the white for is Link's knee. He wears those white little trousers, and he was showing off a little knee there. He's being a little scandalous. Back in the 50s, this wouldn't fly. Oh, and of course his eyes, his little linky eyeballs. And that's another thing you really want to get right if you're doing any sort of character. Pay close attention and make sure you're getting the eyes right, because if the eyes are off, the whole thing's off. And I think we did pretty okay with the eyes. And we're on to this nice gold color. I actually just had most of this yarn laying around. Actually, the truth is, over a year ago, this was the next rug I was planning on making. And I had already gone to the store where I buy yarn and gotten most of these colors. And they just had been sitting in my garage. So when I finally got back to working on this project, I was like, okay, I gotta figure out which colors I intended for what, because I couldn't remember anymore. And I don't know if this was exactly the color I intended for this outside edge that I'm working on, but I really like it. It's got those like black speckles through it, but they didn't really telegraph to the front because I wasn't psyched about the black specks. I was planning on just kind of pulling them all out bit by bit, just going through the whole rug and yanking them, but didn't really have to. Now we can actually start working on Link a little bit. I've got this lighter green color that you can see I've X'd off a few sections again, and I can start filling in his sleeve and his undershirt, kind of where is in between where his collar is, and just a few little bits. Because we all know Link wears a green tunic, but it's kind of a two-tone green. He's got some lighter bits, he's got some darker bits. So I started with the lighter bits. And here's the darker green, which I decided to start with on his hat because it was a big old area, and if I could get that done, it made me feel like I was that much closer to completion. Because when you first look at it, when you get done with your drawing and there's no yarn in the rug at all, it looks like it is an insurmountable thing that it's never going to be done. But you know, you start doing one color after another, crossing them off the list, and slowly but surely it starts to take form. And with his hat all filled up, we can turn to the rest of his tunic. I'm working on his little skirt there, and then working my way up his tiny little body. And most of this went pretty quick. I like to pre-roll my yarn on those little skeins. I rolled up so much of the light green and the dark green. I don't know why. In my head, I was like, I am going to be using so much of this green. And I had so much left over because it didn't really actually take all that much. So that's one thing I gotta work on getting better at, is estimating how much yarn I'm gonna need, because there have been so many times where I'm like, oh no, I'm out of black, I'm out of white, I gotta run back to the store, and I hate running back to the store. Luckily they opened up a Michael's somewhat near me. It used to take me 40 minutes to go anywhere that had yarn, with a good selection anyway. But now, 10 minutes, so that's a relief. That makes my life a little easier with this. And I got this nice color for his skin. I think it suits him well, his pasty white skin. For a long time, I had this one roll of yarn that seemed to last forever that I would use for skin colors. I used it on the Peter Griffin rug. I called it the ground turkey color, because that's what it looked like to me. This one is a little different. I believe the brand of this yarn was Skein Tones, they called it, which I thought was a clever name for one. And also, that's what they sell. They sell skin tone yarn. And so I found a nice skin tone for, a blonde-haired white boy. And of course, we can't forget this guy's hand. And I've always been terrible at drawing hands, but I was tracing the design here, so that helped me out. A closed fist is a lot easier to draw than a hand in any sort of intricate position, but there you go, he has a hand. And I moved on to brown, which I didn't need a whole lot of, just his boot basically, and his belt and a few other little bits and bobs. But I saw doing his boot as an easy little win, just one more thing to check off the list, so I went for it. And we gotta finish up his WWE Championship Wrestling belt, his title belt there. I wanted to make sure everything is nice and full. You want to have everything pretty consistent with how much yarn you're putting into it, because once you're done and you step on the thing, if it's not consistent, you put less yarn in with this color than you did with the other color, you'll feel it under your feet. Some parts will feel very fluffy, other parts will feel firm, and you want it to feel uniform, obviously. And now I'm onto his hair. He's got kind of two-tone blonde hair, so I went with this more gold color for the front, sort of darker bits, his bangs and all that. And then we moved on to this lighter, more just general yellow color for his highlights, the top of his head where the sun is shining on it, and just showing how gold his hair really is under the light of the sun. And this is when I really started to feel good about how it was all coming along. Once I got his hair in with the two tones and I liked how it looked, I was like,
oh yeah, it's all coming together.
Because I actually kind of went back and forth on the colors I was choosing. I think originally I was going to use this yellow color I'm using now for the darker part, and I had an even lighter yellow for the highlights. But I think I'm pretty happy with the decision I made. These colors are a bit more saturated, and they just look nice. And now we're working on the lower Triforce. As you can see, I'm kind of going one line at a time on each of the triangles. I thought that was a good way to help try to keep it uniform a little bit, make everything very symmetrical. And now I have this orange color that I'm using for this sort of swirly pattern on the bottom end of the rug. And I was laughing to myself because this color, it looks a little different on camera, but in person I was like, this looks like crab meat. If you've ever seen those sticks of crab meat, imitation or otherwise, they have that orange and white color to them. And that's what it reminded me of, and it was making me hungry. Because sometimes I get so into my projects that I forget to eat. So that's another thing I've been trying to get better about, is stopping after a while and being like, okay, I need to take care of my body and get some food in me so I don't pass out. But yeah, I'm just filling in this whole intricate design down here. And again, trying to keep it as symmetrical and mirrored as possible. And then starting with this lighter color yellow, filling everything in that is not filled in with orange. And as I mentioned before, I had a different color picked out for Link's hair. This yellow here was going to be the highlights, but I think the more saturated, regular yellow that I went with was the right call. I think that makes him look more like his video game self. And look at that, the whole bottom of the rug is pretty much done. Most of the rug is done at this point. Now all we gotta do is finish up the little odds and ends that are left. And I went with a lighter brown color to fill in his shield. And I was questioning this because, I remember Link having the blue Hylian shield. But again, like I said, I never played Wind Waker. I don't have much experience when it comes to Toon Link. So I didn't know if his shield was just different in that game or what. But I just went with what the original design had. And I like it. It looks nice. It looks kind of like a wooden shield almost. And now we're starting with something that's real fun, which is filling in his sword, which I did with two tones. I did this light gray color for the top half and the point, and then I switch over to the darker gray, which I use for the bottom side of the sword. And I think it came out looking pretty nice. And that is actually the last bit that I needed to do. I just went back through with black to fill up some areas that I missed, like underneath his leg and his little thigh gap there. And I wanted to thicken it up a little bit, so I went around the border one more time with the black, just to give it a thicker border and increase the size ever so slightly overall.
It's free real estate.
But mostly it gives me more edge to roll over when I'm doing the finishing parts of the rug. And that's it, everything is tufted. And now it is time to finish this thing. I'm using my Robert's carpet adhesive with my putty knife and just grabbing bit by bit and slapping it on there, making sure that everything is saturated, every single fiber you want coated in glue, because otherwise they'll just pull right out. So I'm really taking my time here. And people tell me not to do this. I don't care. I dip my hand in a little bit of water to get it nice and wet, and I use my hand to make sure that every single fiber is soaked. People tell me not to do it because they say the glue is toxic, blah, blah, blah. It is very water soluble. It doesn't burn my skin, and I've had so many worse things on my hands. I'm not saying try this at home, but I'm saying it doesn't bother me. I left it for, I think, a week to dry, and I decided to try a new technique. I took a box cutter, and I was like, I'm just gonna cut it out of the frame.
Just cut it out of the frame.
That's a good idea. There we go, because I've had enough of this dude.
Which didn't quite work exactly as well as I was hoping it would. I think if I had a sharper box cutter, it probably would have worked well, but the one I have is a little dull, and a lot of the fibers didn't quite cut, so I had to go around a few times, but it worked out okay. And so now I take it over to my fancy new background, by the way, that I painted myself, and we can start the finishing process. I'm just going around the border, cutting off everything around the border into sections about 3 to 4 inches wide, just making myself nice little flaps that we can then bust out the hot glue gun and start applying some hot glue to each little flap and rolling it over slightly, giving it that nice edge. But now I've plopped it down, and I found a big old Magnum Sharpie that I like to outline with. Now I have a mostly pretty precise size that I need to cut out. And I'm just working my way around with the scissors. I took advantage of the factory edge that was already on there, so it's nice and straight on the bottom and the side already. And I got my Gorilla Glue spray adhesive, which is not a sponsor. It'd be nice if they did, I could use the cash. So as you can see, I'm really just saturating the whole thing and slapping down my backing material, which is that nice anti-slip fabric that I use for pretty much all of them. I like it. And once I have it on there where I want it, you can see I kind of start from the center and I push out with a lot of force to try to get it nice and tight to the back, and also push out any wrinkles and make it look real nice. And then there was a little excess, so I go back with my scissors and try to get some nice clean cuts and trim off all that extra. And now there's only one thing left to do, which is to shave it and really hone the image and try to get it looking as neat and professional as possible. And this took a long time. I spent a lot of hours shaving every single little bit of this rug. I wanted it to be perfect. So I started by just shaving off the top layer, getting everything to a nice even level. And then I went through and I carved out a lot of the shapes, as many as I possibly could. Really just trying to get into every single little nook and cranny to make as many of the details pop and look clean and professional. And yeah, very time consuming.
Open your eyes. Wake up, Link.
And there it is. We have a Legend of Zelda Link rug with a nice mosaic stained glass window background. And I am beyond happy with the end result. I think it came out looking real good. Everything looks really sharp. This was definitely my most elaborate piece I've made thus far. And like I said, the next one I make, I'll probably go a bit more simple for my own sanity. But I'm super happy with the end result. So let me know down in the comments what you think about it. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, because I'm back and I'm going to be making some more rugs, and I'd like if you were there with me. So until next time, I'll see you. Bye.